Welcome everybody to Ein Sof Learning. This week's Torah portion is Toldot. The word Toldot literally means generations. Isaac and Rebekah pray for children. And after 20 years, Rebekah conceives twins who struggle in her womb. God tells her, 2 nations are in your womb, and the younger will prevail. Esav is born first, followed by Yaakov, holding Esav's heel. Esav becomes a hunter. Yaakov is a man of study. Esav sells his birthright to Jacob for lentil stew. Isaac, in Gerar, reopens Abraham's wells and digs new ones, facing disputes over the first 2, but finding peace with the third. Esav marries Hittite women, causing grief to Isaac and Rebekah. As Isaac grows old and blind, he plans to bless Esav, but Rebekah helps Jacob receive the blessing instead. Jacob is blessed with prosperity and leadership, while Esav is left with a harsh prophecy of living by the sword. Jacob flees to Haran to escape Esav's wrath and find a wife, while Esav takes a third wife from Ishmael's family. So as always, we're going to go through certain themes in this week's Parsha and draw lessons and chizuk, encouragement, for our modern day struggles that we're facing, not just as a Jewish people, but as a global society that's on the brink of collapse, as we can see that the forces of darkness and the forces of falsehood are increasing in the world. But the reason that is happening is because the forces of goodness and truth are standing strong. And those that are on the side of evil and wickedness and anti-Israel and anti-God, anti-Torah, are not happy with the way that Israel is conducting this war, because they believe that Israel having that piece of land is not good for the world. Why? Because that means that the Torah is true. That means that the Jewish people are, in fact, the chosen people. And because that means that God has not forsaken His covenant with His people. That is the subliminal or subconscious reason why people hate Israel. Jealousy, envy, and because they want to be right. Simply, they're arrogant. They don't want to accept or humble themselves to the truth of Torah and to the truth of the covenant that is eternal and unbreakable between Hashem and the Jewish people. That's the essence of the hatred of Israel. Jealousy and envy. In this week's Parsha, Jacob and Esav are born. Jacob is the son of Isaac. Last week's Parsha, Isaac was born. And we saw the transition from the generation of Abraham to the generation of Isaac. This week's Parsha, we're witnessing the generation of Jacob and Esav, which are the children of Isaac, take place. They're born from Rebekah. Isaac's wife is Rebekah, and she conceives after 20 years of being barren and trying to have children and being unsuccessful. So Isaac and Rebekah pray together, opposite each other in the same room, and Isaac's prayer gets answered, and Rebekah conceives 2 children, twins, Jacob and Esav. And these 2 babies, while they were in their fetal stage within the womb of Rivkah, begin fighting. Not from the moment they're born, but from the moment they're conceived within the womb of Rivkah, they are fighting. Jacob and Esav represent 2 different paths of spirituality versus materialism. Jacob is the spiritual path. Esav is the materialistic path. Esav is a hunter. If you look in the Parsha, he was actually a hunter and he was focused on the physical world. That represents the aspect of the human psyche which is more materialistic or physical, while Jacob represents the spiritual aspect of the person that is involved in Torah study, mitzvot, good deeds, etc. So Jacob represents spirituality, Esav represents physicality. And God tells Rebekah outright that the elder shall serve the younger. Contrary to what you may have thought would be natural, that the younger should serve the older, even according to Jewish law. You have to respect and honor your older siblings. Yet in this week's Parsha, God tells Rebekah a prophecy. He tells her the future. What's the prophecy? What's the vision that He paints for her? He says not that the younger will serve the older, but the older shall serve the younger. Who's the older and who's the younger? Esav. Esav is born first, therefore he's the elder son. While Yaakov comes out holding the heel of Esav. In fact, that's where he gets his name, Yaakov, which comes from the shoresh ekev, which means heel. Yaakov was holding onto the heel of Esav, which represents the prevailing of spirituality over materialism. Because the older, Esav, shall serve the younger, Yaakov. And this verse, this prophecy that God makes, is written in the future tense. God tells Rebekah that this will happen. The older shall serve the younger. It will be in the future that the older, being the materialistic forces, shall serve the younger, being the spirituality. In fact, the Zohar says that when Mashiach comes, he's going to come riding on a donkey. The word for donkey in Hebrew is chamor. But chamor is the same word for materialism in Hebrew. Chomer. That means physicality, materialism. So what does it mean that Mashiach, the Messiah, is going to be riding upon the donkey? That means that the forces of physicality and materialism will be subjugated to the forces of spirituality and light. That's a similar prophecy that's being said here in this week's Parsha, that the older, being Esav, shall serve the younger, being Yaakov. So this specific prophecy that God makes to Rebekah sets the stage for an eternal struggle between these two forces, which we are still witnessing today. The war between Yaakov and Esav still rages today. And the source of this war is not out in the physical world. The source of this war is happening within each and every individual. And it lies on the people of Israel to step up to their position of Yaakov. Better than Yaakov, they have to step up to the stage of Yisrael. But first you got to become Yaakov. And then you become Yisrael. So what's Yaakov? Yaakov represents the forces of Yud, Ayin, Kuf, and Vet. That's how you spell the word Yaakov. The Yud stands for Yichud, oneness, unity. The Ayin stands for Anava, humility. The Kuf stands for Kedusha, holiness. While the Vet corresponds to Bracha, blessing. Until you become Yaakov, you can never become or reach the level of Yisrael, which is Yashar El, straight to God. First, you have to become Yaakov. You have to emulate the attributes of Yaakov, which is a person who promotes oneness, a person who is humble, a person who is holy, and a person who is a blessing unto the nations. When you embody the teachings of the Torah that your soul is destined to reveal in this world, when you bring that intellectual information down into your heart and into your body, which means into your emotions and into the way you serve God through your actions, then you can prevail over Esav, the materialistic forces that drag you down. And that's all happening within you. This war is happening within the psyche of the individual. And it all started with Esav and Yaakov in the biblical story some several thousand years ago. Look at the world. The world, the United Nations, I should say, not everybody in the world, but I would argue the United Nations has made more cases against Israel than they have made against any other nation throughout the entire lifespan that the United Nations has existed as an organization who claims to promote universal peace and universal justice. Yet the proportionality of the cases made against Israel versus against other nations is unbelievable. So let's face the stark reality that the world, let alone the United Nations, hates Israel. There is a hatred against Israel. I'm not saying every non-Jew hates Israel. No, we have many more supporters than we even realize among the nations. However, by and large, when you look at the United Nations, look at the name that they have, United Nations. These are the Goyim that are uniting together against Israel. That's what the United Nations represents. Spiritually, The United Nation represents that aspect of the nations that is uniting against God, uniting against Israel, uniting against the Torah. They congregate in their offices, in their lecture halls, and they discuss their hatred of Israel. They don't even recognize their anti-Semitism. They don't recognize their delusion because they think that their issue is with Israel. They think that their issue is with the country of Israel, when in fact, their issue is with God. Their war is not against Israel. They are waging war against God. Why do they hate Israel? Because we carry God's light. Because we threaten the very existence of the wicked nations. Because we are a symbol of hope for the world. That God has not forsaken His people. God has not forsaken His world. He still remains loyal to the covenant that He made between Himself and the people of Israel. And even though we may have strayed in several ways with regards to our observance of Torah, we are being called upon in today's generation to return back to the way of Torah, not because of the borders and the politics and to save the state of Israel. No, we're fighting with the Torah for the Torah. We're fighting with the mitzvot for the mitzvot. We're fighting with the truth for the truth. And the path to victory is very clear. Stay rooted in your connection to Hashem, because that is your power in this war. Without the connection to Hashem, you don't have the ability to prevail over the enemy of Esav in this eternal war, which is coming to its culmination in our generation. The next important event that happens in this week's Parsha is that Esav comes home one day from a day of hunting, and he's starving. And he comes home and he sees Yaakov cooking a stew of lentil soup. And Esav was so hungry. He asks Yaakov, please pour me some of this stew. And Yaakov says, sell me your birthright. And in exchange, I will give you this stew. And what does Esav do in his ignorance, in his stupidity, might I say? He spurns the birthright. He sells it for the bowl of stew. What does this birthright represent? It represents the responsibility for God's covenant. It's the most important thing in the world. And Esav gives it up for a bowl of stew. Esav doesn't care about it. He only thinks about his immediate needs. That's the force of materialism within the human psyche. It doesn't care about the birthright. It doesn't care about the covenant. It doesn't care about God. In fact, it doesn't value it at all. It values the bowl of stew more than it does the covenant that God has ordained it to carry out in this world. That's Esav. So what's the lesson? Esav, the evil inclination of a person, doesn't value spirituality. But as a Yaakov, as a person of spirituality, we have to make sure that we do not listen to the voice of Esav. Rather, we have to stay true to our eternal covenant that we know God has made with us. Don't trade what is eternal for what is temporary. Is it worth it to sacrifice your eternal reward in the world to come for a moment of satisfaction? Sin brings momentary pleasure. Restriction brings eternal pleasure. Which one do you rather have? Pleasure in the moment or eternal pleasure, but you sacrifice the moment for the future? That's the war of Esav and Yaakov. And the people of Israel have a connection to the land of Israel. It's not about human approval. And if we are so quick to give land away, to give away property that God has given us for the sake of peace, then it will only bring more chaos. Just like Jacob, we have to value the covenant above all else and never sell our identity, never give away our land again, never fall for the mistakes and the delusions of Esav ever again. What's Esav? Esav represents the West. The West pressured Israel to give away land to the Palestinians. And what came about? Hamas. And we have to stay true no matter the pressure to the covenant that we know we have with Hashem. Stop listening to Esav. Stop listening to the UK. Stop listening to the United Nations. Stop listening to the anti-Semites of the world, which knowingly or unknowingly are jealous of you, and they want nothing more than to invalidate the covenant that we have with Hashem. As descendants of Yaakov, we have to stay true to our covenant. Otherwise, we are at risk of being like Esav and giving it up. Although, the truth is that you can never really give it up because Hashem has made this covenant with Israel, and even if we go away and we try to avoid it, Hashem will find us and bring us back. Because Hashem loves us even when we neglect Him. Even when we abandon God, God never abandons Israel. If that doesn't make you emotional, then that means we don't really understand the relationship that we have. Hashem loves Israel. No matter what, no matter when. Hashem loves Israel. It's like a marriage. Through thick and through thin, we have been together. Even though today we can see that we are at a rocky position. However, we are being called upon to remember our covenant, remember our calling to be a light unto the nations. First, we have to bring the light down into ourselves, and then we can be a light unto the nations. Number 3, in this week's Parsha, Isaac reopens the wells that Abraham dug, but the Philistines filled it up with dirt. Every time Abraham would dig a well in last week's Parsha, the Philistines, the neighboring anti-Semites, would go and fill up the well with dirt. This week, Isaac reopens those wells and he keeps digging, and finally he finds a well that they don't fight over. Every time that he would dig a well, the Philistines would come and fight them. The shepherds of Gerar would come and fight with the shepherds of Yitzchak. And for the sake of peace, Isaac said, okay, I'll go find another well. Another place to dig the well. He found the second place. They came again and they harassed him. Okay, I'll go find another place. He dug a third well. And this well, finally, they leave him alone. And what's the message here? The nations that are against Israel, they will try to block the flow of our light. What does this well represent? What does it mean to dig a well? A well is a contraption that allows you to dig water out from the ground. You can take the water that exists within the ground and use it for whatever you need. What's water represent? Torah, good deeds, mitzvot. That's what water represents in spirituality in Torah. And the nations will come and fill up our wells, meaning they will try to discount all of the good that Israel has done. They will try to ignore it, and not only ignore it, but fill it up with dirt. All of the work that we have done as Jewish people, they will flip the narrative and make every positive quality of Israel into a negative. They will focus on the bad and never acknowledge the good. They will twist the good into dirt. But just like Isaac, we must persevere. We must keep digging new wells. Despite the actions of the anti-Semites, we have to keep moving forward, keep digging more wells. Every mitzvah, every act of kindness, every act of charity is another well that we are digging to create an even greater bond between Israel and Hashem. Every well we dig is another rope that ties us to Hashem. Each person is a well digger. Every person is Yitzchak. Keep digging. No matter how much resistance you face, no matter how much persecution, because the persecution is actually coming because of the weakness of Israel in digging these wells. The more that we stray from digging these wells, from mitzvot, from Torah, the persecution increases because our koach is only found in our connection to Hashem. The moment we betray our connection with Hashem is the moment that the anti-Semitism and persecution increases among Israel. Another event that happens this week is Isaac gives Jacob the blessing that was originally meant for Esav, but he takes it from Esav. He pretends to be Esav, and he gets blessed by his father. And the father blesses him as so: may God give you of the dew of the heaven and the fatness of the earth. And when Esav comes home, he's furious and he's heartbroken when he learns that Jacob stole the blessing, but the blessing remains with Jacob despite what has been done. Rebecca actually helps Yaakov because Rebecca loves Yaakov, while Yitzchak loved Esav. We can get into the meaning of that and why Isaac loved Esav another time. There is a reason behind why Isaac loved Esav and Rebecca loved Yaakov. And Rebecca knew the prophecy that God told her. It seems like maybe she didn't share the prophecy with Isaac, because she knew that the older will serve the younger. She knew that Hashem's will was that Esav should be subservient to Yaakov. And for that reason, she orchestrated the events to make sure that Yaakov will end up receiving the birthright and the blessing, not Esav. What does this teach us? Yes, the world may rage against us. Yes, the United Nations may be biased. But we do not need to apologize, because our right to the land of Israel and our mission comes directly from God, as we've been repeating in this video. We must stand firm in this truth no matter what darkness we may face. And don't let anger, don't let opposition shake your confidence. The moment you doubt this truth and this confidence, you are increasing the powers of Amalek and Hamas in the world. That's why Safek, which means doubt, is Gematria Amalek. The more the Jewish people doubt this connection, they doubt this chosenness, they doubt this covenant, is the moment that Amalek prevails against Israel. And the last lesson I want to leave you with is after Yaakov receives the blessing, Esav plots to kill him. Remember, Esav is the forces of materialism. Jacob steals the blessing from Yitzchak. Jacob represents spirituality. He outsmarts his evil inclination, which is Esav. And Esav plots to kill him. The evil inclination of the person gets so enraged that he says, I'm going to kill the Yetzer HaTov. Remember, Yaakov is the good inclination, the forces of spirituality within the person. And Esav is the evil inclination, the forces of materialism within the person. And these two are at war. And Yaakov outsmarts the evil inclination and gets blessed by Isaac. And Esav plots to kill Yaakov. So Rebecca, their mother, hearing of this, urges Jacob to flee from Esav. Remember, the matriarchs in the Torah have a certain sixth sense. All women really have this sixth sense. It's like an instinct that they know better than men through feeling and through understanding. It comes naturally to them. It's almost like intuition. And she tells Yaakov to flee to her family in Haran. Isaac blesses Jacob again, sending him on his way with the covenant's promise. And Yaakov actually leaves his family and his home, just like Abraham did in Parshat Lech Lecha. And he begins a long journey of hardship, growth, spiritual transformation. He's exiled from his land and he goes to another land. What's the lesson in that? Exile is not defeat. Usually we think when we're exiled, that means we've lost. Not so. The Jewish people were exiled. Do you think we've lost? No. Exile is the beginning of redemption. It is specifically when you're in the exile that you are then given the opportunity to build your faith and your connection, which will bring you out from that exile into redemption. Meaning, if you were just spit out into a world of redemption, then you wouldn't have... What's the point of that? You didn't earn your spot there. You're getting it for free. But if you were placed into a world of exile and you earned your way to redemption, then you can appreciate the reward. Then you will be able to connect to Hashem in a way that is long-lasting as opposed to short-lived, which is how it would have been if you were just placed into the world of redemption to begin with. What happened with Adam and Eve? They were placed into the Garden of Eden. It was a perfect world. And yet, they ate from the tree of knowledge because they hadn't earned their spot in the Garden of Eden. They didn't understand the worth of what God was giving them. And neither would we had we be placed in a world of redemption. If things were to come easy, if this war were to be easy, if attaining our spiritual heights and making our tikkun complete would be easy, then there would be no reward in the end of the day. People enjoy the fruits that they planted. If you didn't plant those seeds and it's someone else's fruits, you're not going to enjoy it as much as if you were the one who planted that tree and you enjoyed that fruit, because your effort, your hard work pays off. The reward that comes for your efforts is long lasting. Whereas the pleasures that you consume without effort, without earning it, they actually bring you shame, which is the opposite of pleasure. Shame is the feeling of hell, the feeling of being burned, the soul being burned. That's the feeling of hell in Kabbalah. That's explained by the mystics. What's the feeling of hell? It's shame. So every time we receive a pleasure without earning it, we are bringing shame upon our soul. We are increasing the fires of hell. Metaphorically, there's not physical fire, but it's a spiritual feeling of shame that we bring upon ourselves every time we receive things for free. That's why we don't want to receive for the self. Rather, we want to receive for the sake of giving back to God. And at that moment, we're able to benefit from the reward in a way that's long-lasting and more. And more. Not only that reward, but that reward will lead you to another mitzvah, to another mitzvah, to another mitzvah. Because a person who does a mitzvah causes himself to do another mitzvah. But a person who does a sin causes himself to make another sin. It's a natural law. Gemara states that openly. When you do one mitzvah, it causes another mitzvah. When you do one sin, it causes another sin. The more selfish we are, the more selfish we become. The more altruistic we are, the more altruistic we become. That's the law of spirituality. So what's the lesson in Yaakov's fleeing from Esav? Exile is not defeat. Rather, it's a call to build and transform ourselves through the exile, through the darkness, is how we reach the light, is how we reach greatness. Jacob's journey teaches us that redemption starts from within. What is exile from a Kabbalistic point of view? It's body consciousness. When the soul is being oppressed by the forces of materialism, which is represented by the body. So in a time of struggle, in a time of internal conflict between Esav and Yaakov, our Yetzer Hara and a Yetzer HaTov, every mitzvah, every act of unity, and every step of Torah learning becomes a brick in the third temple. You are building the third temple. You are bringing the Geula. You are bringing Mashiach for yourself. And only when you bring Mashiach for yourself can you then help the world come one step closer to the collective Mashiach. The collective Mashiach, which is what we're all waiting for, depends on the individual Mashiach that we are each called upon to bring for ourselves. How can you help someone else if you yourself need saving? Learn to connect to Hashem. Allow Him to save you. Allow Him to bring you to the light, and then you can help be a conduit to reach others. The Shekhinah will return when we rise to build, just as Jacob did. The moment you build this third temple, the moment you unite your mind and your heart, which is the first and second temple, which have been destroyed, the moment you rebuild them, and you manifest the third temple within you, as that storage that is able to contain the light of the Shekhinah, it is at that moment that the Shekhinah will return to Jerusalem, Ruach HaKodesh will return to Israel, and truth will prevail once again. Zman HaMashiach. That's the time of the Messiah, which we're living in right now. And B'ezrat Hashem, we will see it come to its fruition with our own eyes. So I thank you once again for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you learned something new, don't be afraid to share it with your loved ones, because again, if you learn something, I'm sure that your loved ones can learn something from it as well. It's all about spreading the light. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey everybody, thanks for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't be afraid to share this video with your loved ones, as we know that we are trying to reach as many souls as we possibly can with the wisdom of the Torah, specifically its inner dimensions called Kabbalah. which is the mystical secrets that are contained within God's holy Torah. And I invite you to join me on this effort to spreading this wisdom to the four corners of the world so we can prepare for what we've all been waiting for, the final redemption, where Israel will be redeemed along with the righteous Gentiles.